Yugoslavia, which it was thought would adopt a democracy with the least upset, began to collapse in mid-1991, metastasizing from internal aggression. The until recently joint Yugoslav People's Army, or JNA, attacked Slovenia, Croatia, and then Bosnia and Herzegovina. The magnitude of the crime of the so-called JNA, even then already serving the Serb cause, was growing with the direction of its withdrawal. Many reasons of history, sense, and future spoke in favor of preserving this land whole. When Tito died, the suppressed nationalism broke out. The biggest was the most arrogant one, the most powerful one, because it took over all the authorities. The communist officials who had built their careers by suppressing all that was thought to have national identity changed their ideology in the new order like chameleons and became passionate supporters of the heavenly mission of their own people. The crime of murdering Yugoslavia touched rock bottom here. The country was murdered from its top.
6 vekova kasnije, danas, opet smo u bitkama I pred bitkama. One nisu oružane, mada I takve još nisu isključene, ali bez obzira kakve da su, one bitke se ne mogu dobiti bez odlučnosti, hrabrosti I požrtvovanosti, bez tih dobrih osobina koje su onda davno bile prisutne na polju Kosovu.
The threat was systematically implemented. The political, intellectual and religious leadership of Serbia mercilessly introduced methods of institutionalized violence into the social life of Yugoslavia. In most cases, the interests of other peoples were brutally ignored. Such acts inevitably pushed the national community into bloodshed. A very clear prospect of catastrophe was present in Bosnia and Herzegovina, a center of coexistence of different nationalities and religions for centuries. In the European atmosphere of a single nation and a non-sectarian spirit, Bosnia had been a jewel of differences and fertile pluralism for ages. Those distinctive features some people could not understand, others tended to destroy. Most Bosnians and Herzegovinians wanted to preserve the life together that had been built through centuries, knowing that expelling people from their homes would lead to an unimaginable tragedy. The leadership of Bosnia and Herzegovina had followed the wishes of its people. It had supported the idea of democracy in Yugoslavia, of consensus, the highest human rights standards, and an economy of open markets. The Izetbegovic-Gligorov plan was the last democratic attempt to preserve the national community upon a basis of equality of all the constituent republics and sovereignty of the peoples within them. However, those who commanded the army decided to lead the country by a dictatorship. They began to force Slovenia out of the common state borders. Slovenia was already ethnically independent and did not allow itself to become Serbian. The rest of the country was to have been reshaped by tanks along the line of the idea of the so-called Great Serbia, for centuries dreamt about, that would have been a dungeon for the rest of the people. The National Socialist program showed intolerance toward all that was different. its actors had perceived the very idea of equality and sovereignty within a common country as an insult.
Ovo nije dobro što vi radite. Ovo je put na koji vi hoćete da izvedete Bosnu i Hercegovinu, ista ona autostrada pakla i stradanja kojom su pošli Slovenija i Hrvatska. Nemojte da mislite da nećete odvesti Bosnu i Hercegovinu u pakao, a muslimanski narod možda u nestanak. Jer muslimanski narod ne može da se odbrani ako bude rat ovdje. Kako ćete vi spriječiti da svakoga ne ubija u Bosni i Hercegovini? Kako se može spriječiti rat u Hrvatskoj, pogotovo tamo u rubnim krajevima gdje su na dodiru Srbi i Hrvati? Vi ovdje hoćete da u Evropi isposlujete nešto na šta nemate pravo.
Dobro, ipak potrebno je da nastupim odmah za izlaganje gospodina Karadžića. Naime, njegovo izlaganje, njegov način izlaganja, njegove poruke, možda na najbolji način objašnjavaju zašto mi i možda nećemo više da ostanemo u Jugoslaviji. To večeras govorim ovdje. I još nešto. Njegov način, njegove poruke možda objašnjavaju zašto i drugi neće da ostanu u toj Jugoslaviji. Takvu Jugoslaviju kakvu hoće gospodin Karadžić više niko neće. Neće više niko možda osim srpskog naroda. Takvu Jugoslaviju su u očima jugoslovenskih naroda, Slovenaca, Hrvata, Makedonaca, Albanaca, Mađara, muslimana, jednostavno omrzli u očima Evrope i svijeta. Takvi načini kako to Karadžić radi. Međutim, jer Karadžić je samo izraz jednog načina, mišljenja, jednog pristupa, mi smo se sve nadali i nadamo se i dalje da će proraditi, da se naša nada, da će srpski narod doći do svoje demokratske tradicije, da će srpski narod otkriti one zalihe demokratske tradicije koje imaju i koje ga odlikuju, po kome je bio poznat u svijetu. Ovo što se radi danas, ovo ne služi na čast srpskog narodu, ni ovaj način istupanja, ove prijetnje koje se iskazuju. Muslimanski narod neće nestati. To ja poručujem gospodinu Karadžiću.
Serb envoys left the parliament without being able to find any reason for bringing BH to the level of constitutional equality with other federal units in Yugoslavia. Pretending to support the idea of a common country, Karadžić and his Social Democratic Party were practically just buying time for a forced annexation of BH to the so-called Great Serbia. The discussion on the independence of BH was held in October 1991, but the Social Democratic Party had already announced the so-called Serb autonomous districts in May 1991, thus suspending the legitimacy of the BH country and throwing away its laws. These shots, taken secretly, show how they turned the clock 50 years backwards. Fascism and the ideology of the Chetnik's knife had risen again. In the Serb autonomous districts, the final preparations for the mass killings of Bosniaks were in progress. They were identifying locations for concentration camps and the largest mass rapes of women in history formulated as a war aim. There was no doubt as to what would have been the destiny of non-Serbs in the potentially Serb-led Bosnia and Herzegovina. That's why the referendum was a reasonable decision. Anxious citizens requested it from their parliamentarians. Though held in a hurry, lacking adequate preparations, in an atmosphere of threats and obstructions by Serb nationalists, the referendum has manifested the will of the majority to live in peace and equality for all. International observers confirmed the full regularity of the referendum. The percentage of people who have voted for democracy was unusually high. More than 98% of the voters voted for the independence and the sovereignty of Bosnia and Herzegovina. The citizens didn't have time to express their happiness with this fatefully precious achievement. Furious because of the majority disobedience, the Serbian Social Democratic Party, on March the 1st, 1992, filled the streets with its followers who blocked all the exits and paralyzed life in the city. These sockheads, as people used to call them satirically, were a part of the headquarters' terrorist plan to attack the constitutional order of the country. Bosnia and Herzegovina was about to face days, months, and years of untold suffering and destruction. At the beginning of 1992, Bosnia was the country with the greatest concentration of arms across the planet. 4 corps were stationed here, equipped with powerful weapons and modern combat systems. During the aggression, the units of 5 more corps of the Yugoslav National Army attacked Bosnia. With the paramilitary formation of the SDS and Chetniks units from Serbia and Montenegro, the aggressors' power increased up to 200,000 people. Induced by the hatred towards all that was non-Serb, the unwanted armada in Bosnia had available over 1,000 tanks, several hundred armored vehicles, 3,500 of artillery pieces, and inexhaustible resources of guns and ammunition. Its sick leadership mentally prepared the army for committing crimes unprecedented in this century, within the last 1,000 years of its history. The advantage of the aggressor was not only in his powerful war machinery, but also in his international allies from the United Nations Security Council, which managed to impose the arms embargo. The ban on arms selling on the territory of former Yugoslavia was practically applied only to the army of Bosnia and Herzegovina. That was obviously the goal of the traitors behind the stage. 3 of 5 Western forces justified the ban, saying that more arms in Bosnia would have automatically meant a more fierce war. In such a switch of theses, the meanings of unarmed people and peace were mixed, which helped the aggression and the genocide to progress. Naturally, defenseless people are always seen as a victim in every conflict. The political leadership of Bosnia and Herzegovina wrote to all relevant addresses and knocked on all important doors in the world in order to collect crumbs of justice for its people. In vain, even the appeal for lifting the embargo on arms in Bosnia and Herzegovina on a limited scale for a limited amount of defensive arms was not accepted. Atrocities committed by the aggressor in Bijeljina, Zvornik, Bratunac, Višegrad, Foča, Vlasenica, Prijedor, Kozarac, Brčko, Sarajevo, Gacko, Trebinje, and all over Bosnia and Herzegovina daily mobilized thousands of defenders. The resistance to the aggression was not the result of an ad hoc decision. As early as June 1990, at a pre-election rally of the Party of Democratic Action in Velika Kladuša, all enemies of Bosnia